Okay, thank you for tuning in to Stampscaping 101. I'm trying to add in some additional white pigment ink in kind of this wispy application using these cotton swabs. And I'm just kind of trying to add in a little bit of kind of airy streaks, you might say, kind of like I think it's a stratus cloud or something like that. But just to add a little bit of textural interest, I guess, to the that area of the sky, like that, which is kind of the fun things to do in a landscape scene. It's those little embellishments that I think are really fun to add. But anyways, this scene for me was about these two little figures here, and I wanted to create kind of maybe a 3 or 4 scene kind of theme, using them hiking in different areas. It's kind of like a personal journey of mine. That isn't necessary. When I did that design, it doesn't necessarily, I wasn't thinking of me when I did it, but there's some areas that I used to go hiking as a kid, a lot of times with my dad, and this is one of the areas. Well, this isn't, I didn't design these stamps around it, but we used to go hiking out in the fields a lot, what we call that California chaparral with some oak trees. And I mentioned in this video I'm doing this kind of in brown tones, because if you're out here in California, central and southern California, you know, oftentimes, more often than not, the hills and kind of grassy terrain it's brown. So this kind of represents something like a couple people coming back from a few-hour hike, you know, through that type of terrain. The oak trees wouldn't be bare like that. They're green pretty much year-round. But kind of a little bit of a scene here, but just changing the color scheme around a bit, you know, to reflect a different mood of nature, a different season of nature. You know, doing grassy areas, I'm often doing them in green tones, and then filling it with a field of, you know, like spring wildflowers or something like that, you know, with some lupin or pearly everlasting white ones and pinks and things like that to kind of bring it alive. Now, I've tried to stay away from all those different types of colors because I don't think you would see it, you know, in this time of year, you know, or this season that this depicts, but I've used a little bit of in here in terms of a peach, you know, paint pen in here as far as some touches, but I don't know, just to change things up a little bit in terms of terrain. You know, we want to kind of bring in some variation once in a while to our scenes, and just by changing the color scheme around, going with very similar compositions or the same composition that you've done, can really change the spirit of a scene and the entire feel of it. And that's something I'd recommend doing sometimes, doing really similar compositions, but seeing what you can do by just changing the color schemes around. I don't know, maybe kind of enhancing one element over another one. Another time, like, I could stamp out these trees in black here, and another time I could stamp everything out much lighter, let's say in blue tones or something like that, and I could stamp these in gray, and suddenly this scene would take on kind of more of a, like a wintry, foggy type of look. And that's, doing those types of exercises is really fun, because you can really expand the range of your stamps in terms of kind of a thematic change. And you know, it doesn't cost you anything more. It's just using the same exact stamps and using inks that you probably already have in your repertoire. So anyways, that was really fun to do, and it gives me some additional ideas. I want to go for some more of these wispier clouds or something like that. What you'll find in this video, if you watch it, is I just mentioned that, you know, speaking of all these brown tones, if I stick to just brown tones down here, you know, these little golden brown tones, I guess you can say, and keeping the area up here just blue, it kind of fragments things a little bit, and it looks too separate. So what I've done is this pink here in the sky, you can see a little touch of it here and there, like down here, this area, the brown. You can see a little bit of that pink in here, hopefully on your screen. And this blue up here in the sky, I've used a little touch of blue in here. If that looks kind of odd, it's because it's not white like this. I've added some of that light blue down here to just kind of integrate the scene a little bit more, the areas of the scene. There's a little bit of green down here too, just in terms of, I don't know, it could represent kind of a changing of the season, you know, the transition going from one season to the next. It could be spring into summer or something like that, but just, I don't know, it's an excuse too, just to add a different hue down here. So if this looks a little bit greenish, it's because it is. If you just light green here and there, just to kind of liven up that, you know, certain range of hue in the scene. So doing little things like that can keep things from getting a little bit too monotonous in terms of your color schemes. And of course, as always, kind of oscillate things a little bit with between light and dark. And that keeps things kind of fresh, you know, in terms of all of the different variations that happen within a given space. And we have little shadows and things like that throughout that space as well. So all little things within a small space can really give a very small scene here. This is a quarter-page scene, a lot of richness within that space. So little details here and there, and I think that's when the scenes really start to kind of come into focus and I don't know, kind of add up to a kind of a more interesting whole that kind of invites kind of closer inspection by your viewer, and you know, so that they're able to enjoy kind of more things within a given scene, kind of the nuances, you might say, and the details. Okay, so anyways, thanks again for tuning into the channel, and if you choose to watch this, I hope you enjoy it, and it was a lot of fun to do. Okay, I'm going to see if I can come up with something a little bit different in terms of a color scheme, and we'll focus it around the Cricut Path stamp. Okay, I'm going to do this one in some brown tones, be like a summer, fall, in kind of the Southern California landscape, and it would be kind of really indicative of the hills around here most of the time, unlike a really wet spring like we've had this year, but I don't know, most of the times, and sometimes in years of drought, you know, we go quite some time without seeing the hills kind of greening up. I'm going to do this in a dark brown. It could certainly be done in black or something like that, but I would stick to kind of a darker tone. If you want to bring in some lighter tone browns or yellows and oranges or something like that, I would do that afterwards. But as far as the for, you know, the initial impression, I would go with something dark, just so it holds up against all the additional tones that you would bring into the scene. Okay, this is the tall grass stamp. It's kind of the tall grass large, and I'll use this for my foreground grass textures. I'll go for about 3 impressions, I guess. And this is the Sedge filler, my kind of universal kind of filler stamp with a grassy texture. Something like that. And And I'll use that grass texture and some of these background hills as well. I'll stop right there. I'll create a horizon line, then let's keep this up here for some additional tone that'll represent some textures in the sky, some blue sky or whatever. Alright, let's see. We have our foundation set here. We'll bring in some other imagery, but let's just start applying some tones. We're going to go for your warm, tan, brownish colored schemes. I have some different tones here that could be used. This is a Distress Antique Linen, Memento Desert Sand. You have your Ranger Peach Bellini, but basically just start off with any one of these would do in terms of being a light color. Okay. All of these inks too are, the characteristic of them all are they're fairly thick inks. So, okay, I'm not looking at this as just like a coloring book or something. I'm thinking about kind of some lights and darks at this point in time. This is a fairly light color, so I mean we could tone this whole thing in, but I'm leaving some areas lighter than others. In other words, less ink on some parts of this, okay? Now where you do that, it really doesn't matter. Just so long as there's a little bit of an, what's the word I'm looking for? Just this oscillation of light and dark, okay? So, we're kind of hinting at a lighting scheme. You know, see right here, that's a little bit lighter, a little bit darker here, a little bit light in the road and spots, little patches of lightness around, okay? And that's just to give it some variation, some kind of tonal variation in the end result. And I think that makes the scene less kind of flat when the whole area is toned, colored the same. It tends to flatten out the area. And in this case, we're going for more of a, we want to create some depth, and if there's depth within a given space, there's going to be some variation. Alright. Now, I mean, there are some areas, like around the image, you can see some shadows, right? Some darker areas than others. I tend to ink those areas up in the impression with some additional tone, just to kind of reiterate what's going on in the image itself. Okay, that is that color. Zoom in a little bit. You can see a little bit of this oscillation going on between light and darks. That's just with two of the very light tones. Memento Desert Sand is very light as well. Okay, I'm going to add a little of this Peach Bellini. It's a little bit more of an orangish tone. You certainly don't have to use any set amount, like a minimum amount of colors, but if you're working with a certain family of colors or a certain range of tones, and if you have things that are fairly similar, I don't know, you can always use them. It can't hurt. Whether or not they're going to be kind of effective and, you know, adding anything to the scene, we don't know, but why not just give it a try? That's what I always think. Okay, let's try some additional tones. Here's a tea dye, Distress. It's a little bit more of like a neutral brown, I would say. Browns are generally warm tones because of the colors used to create them, but some are warmer than others and kind of richer. This one's more kind of neutral, I find. At least my pad here, you know, when I'm using it. Not better or worse, but just different. And with transparent dye-based inks like this, I feel that they added up, kind of create a richer whole. Alright? Kind of like one of those things, their sum total is, how does the saying go? The sum total is larger than, something to the effect that they're bigger than their sum total. Maybe that's what it is. Okay. Kind of looking real brown, which I'm going for, but I think it can use a little bit more rich something. Tone, warmth, maybe. In terms of what I'm going after. Okay, but that's a good foundation, though. That was the Walnut Stain Tea Dye, as far as the Distress ink range goes. But I really want to warm this up. Okay, let's try some mustard seed. Okay. Alright. I'm just going to use the same tool. I've blotted off some of the ink here. Okay, so it's really dry. So going into a lighter color, I don't think it's going to do anything bad to it, you know, in terms of polluting the lighter tone. I think it's just fine. Okay. It's really warming things up. It's a lot brighter too, okay? Not necessarily good or bad, but kind of adding to it a little bit. Adding something, that's for sure. But now this is really bright, so kind of, you know, be careful as far as your usage goes. Get what you know, kind of, you know, move closer to that kind of the end result that you're going after. Now I say that with an asterisk because I don't always know what I'm going after. I guess I know I'm going after a certain feel, but how that kind of, you know, what happens in the process and what eventually comes up, we'll see. But I was going for a warmer tone, and there you have it. Alright? But now, I don't want that look, okay? But I want that as one of the layers within the look, okay? Because I think that's going to add a richness to the end result as far as what we see. But that's what the whole thing about this kind of layered process is. There's all kinds of variations that come about, and in this case, I don't want things so yellowy, okay? But I do want them warm and bright in some areas. I do want some areas that are dull, so we have a kind of a range of intensity within the scene, okay? So, by layering some of this brown over the top of it, I feel I do get, you know, that kind of that rich intensity, but in some areas, but in other areas it'll kind of be more of a mellow version of it because I'll have colors over the top of that yellow. Okay. And that being said, I'm still being somewhat careful about retaining some areas of light. Okay, we have some areas of light here, background, and these little areas within the design. Over here it's looking a little bit kind of uniform in terms of the value range. So why don't I come in and just kind of break that up a little bit and add a little bit of variation. We'll start making it a little bit darker here, maybe. And a little bit down in the foreground, perhaps. Okay. That's that. That was kind of a medium tone brown from Marvy. This is a dark brown. Now we have a lot of tones laid down here, and that's kind of where Marvy inks really Marvy inks, I would say they make things a little bit easier just in terms of the process, the drying process. Sometimes if you get 3 or 4 colors laid down, especially with those thicker inks like the Distress inks or the Mementos, having kind of a thinner ink to work with and layer on top of them kind of just makes things go a little bit faster. The reason being is because these ones just, if you're working with a thinner ink, it's able to kind of penetrate the paper a little bit faster and maybe set up a little bit faster as well and dry. Okay. It kind of has a different feel. Not that you have to use them though. And of course, where you live and the relative kind of humidity of the region will affect your drying time with your inks, of course. If you're kind of in an arid area, an arid terrain, or an arid kind of time of year where things are really dry, these inks might dry considerably faster for you. So, you know, as far as the viscosity of the ink, it might not really matter, you know, to use thicks and thins. You can use all of thicker ones and they might be drying really fast and setting up. So, okay. With your darker tones, you can kind of enhance your shadows a little bit more. Okay. Something like that. At this point in time, I feel that this is starting to kind of take shape now. The reason being is because this is the color that I stamped the imagery in, and sometimes you have to get to that same color for it to really start, kind of the cohesion of the piece to start coming together. Okay, now let's add in some additional texture, okay? I'm just ripping a paper towel here. And just instead of getting these wiped areas like that, why not let's go with some of the texture in the terrain, and kind of going with that torn paper towel mask and adding in some textures like this, or tone like this against a torn paper towel will add a little bit of texture into it, like say something like that, a little bit more variation than just say a swipe, okay? So it's a little bit more varied, okay? Like so, and it goes with our, kind of goes with our textures of things like these grasses. Okay. Go in the background. Kind of looking for a good tear here. Okay, something like this. When it starts getting to the backgrounds, I tend to go for kind of more of a thin kind of background shadow, something like that. In the foreground, it might be, you know, a bigger shape. Okay, so we have this kind of this oscillation running in here between lights and darks now, but we do it with some texture, okay? Looks a bit more rich in terms of your textural, I don't know, textural statement, I guess you can say. You know, but just having those little things like that, you know, being formed by the torn edges can be quite effective, I think. Like that in there. It looks a little bit more integrated to me as well. Having all of these extra shapes and the tone applied in kind of that rough, you know, variation as well. Than just your straight swipe. Okay. Now this down here looks like it could use a little something. It's looking a little bare to me, but I tell you what, why don't we go for just a slight variation of color. Let's say that this is kind of going into the summer months, but maybe you have a little bit of green remaining. This is your distressing peeled paint. It's a little bit darker than I'd want, so I'm kind of blotting it off here, just so I can get a lighter version of it in some of these lighter areas that I've retained some of the kind of white of the paper. Okay. So it's just a hint of some green down here, okay? Can you see that? And I think it wouldn't hurt like in these areas as well. Okay? I think that looks better than just one kind of hue that's running in there. So what you do by doing something like this without really making a big statement, I don't want a big green statement, but by having it in there, what you're doing is you're introducing kind of another hue into the scene. That therefore we have texture running in here, we have intensity, textural contrasts, there's contrast in terms of value, light and dark, and then there's kind of an extended range in terms of if you look at like a color wheel or something like that, we're looking at browns or something like that in one area, and just by bringing that green in there, we're extending that range of hue and the variation in there by introducing that. But you know, it's fairly subtle, you know, but it kind of all relates in some ways, especially when you're kind of, you know, it can't help but relate because you're blending it into, you know, the background tones, but, you know, yellow kind of moves into that green range. Okay, so we have our foundation in here. I'm going to bring some other trees in here, but I'm going to stamp those afterwards because I don't want to stamp out some dark trees in here and have to wait for them to dry before I start bringing in some tones over the top of it. But let's start doing something in the sky. We have a sky area that doesn't have anything. Let's just go with the let's go with a turning sky. All right, let's do something with some blue tones. Okay, this is just your Adirondack Lights Aqua. You can go with a distressing, I think it's Tumbled Glass is that light blue one, I'm not sure. But any kind of light blue would do, okay? Here's the thing, kind of, if you want to create some variation in the sky, retain some of the white of the paper, if you can see that. I'm working really super light right now, so I'm not really sure what's showing up in the camera, but there's this little streak of white in there, and it's a streak of white. It's really because the area around it has been defined by streaks of blue. Okay, let's go with this slightly darker blue in the form of the salvia blue, and the darker I go here, that little variation will kind of reveal itself more. If you can't really see it on the camera here, it's very subtle. That first color of blue to the that aqua was it was a shadow stamping ink, sorry. Couldn't remember. Shadow stamping inks, people, you know, it was just really, they were really light values, so you'd stamp something like a word or an image, then the idea was you would stamp it again, kind of a little bit offset, and it would form, it would look more like a shadow because it was just so light, you know, so instead of just, you know, stamping it, you know, making an impression and making another impression with the second, you know, stamping of it, it would be kind of a full intensity, lighter version of something. But it was great for layering, the layering process, having inks that were fairly bright, but also very light in value, okay? Light and bright are different things. Bright is meaning the relative intensity of something, you know, the saturation of it. Okay, so anyways, this is a Memento Bahama Blue. You can kind of see what I'm going for now in terms of creating this little streaky area of the sky. What that ends up being, or representing, is kind of this cloud up there, kind of a, oh boy, can't remember. Was it a cirrus cloud, I think it was called? Can't remember. There's so many different clouds and variations of types of clouds. Stratus? I don't know. Okay, now with this blue, I am coming down into that brown a little bit, just so, I don't know. It's not going to make that brown blue, but it kind of integrates it a little bit, and I put a little bit of that blue down here, just in terms of introducing a little bit of that color. Not the Bahama blue, but one of those lighter ones. And I brought a little bit of that blue into here as well, just so the two different areas aren't kind of isolated and unrelated. Okay, let's go for a dark blue. Okay, and I'll kind of match the sky area just in terms of the value. You know, this down here gets fairly dark, so maybe I'll go a little bit darker up here. You notice how I'm kind of always starting off the page or halfway on, and I'm also going with a fairly light touch, you know, for this. But as I streak it in, I'm kind of going like this, and it's kind of like a pendulum, okay? I don't just go with a straight line and up, okay? I want it to kind of taper off like that, okay? And that's what's happening here. kind of a, I wouldn't say high noon cloud, but something like that. Let's bring in a little bit of let's bring in some, I'm trying to think of a color to use in here. Let's bring in a little bit of pink into it, okay? Maybe we'll kind of make it a little bit of a later time of day. Boy, this pink is super, super light. This is the tropical raspberry. If you have a really pale pink, that would be the color to use. I mean, if you have tropical raspberry, that's good too, but I don't know, this is a shadow stamping ink. Again, it's a seashells or Adirondack lights, both the same. You can even bring some of this down into your terrain. Okay, it's super, super light, alright? That's why I can just go straight into it. But again, having kind of some kind of relationship between the different areas can kind of help. Alright, now, okay, that I think that shows up on the camera. I wasn't quite sure if it would show up or not. It was so pale, but I think I do see a little bit of a change of hue there. You can go with a darker tone up there if you want to, you know, and bring some, you know, a little bit more variation and kind of apparent I don't know, hue change up there in terms of your pinks and violets and whatnot as it overlaps the blue. I think I'm just going to leave it as is. I don't remember the last time I used that color. It was just so light. My pad isn't, I don't think it's dry, it's just that's how light it is, so you can barely see it. Okay, now let's go in and kind of add some additional imagery. I think I'm going to add, I want these trees to be fairly dark. I think they would look fine in dark brown as well, but just from experience, I know that if I stamp the, you know, these trees into dark brown in here at this point in time, because, you know, this page is, it's not soaked or anything like that, but it's just a little bit moist. And I want these impressions to be nice and straight. You ever ink up a stamp and you just can't tell if you've inked it up or not? Sometimes, I don't know, the ink gets to a certain kind of I don't know, dryness on your pad, and it's kind of hard to tell if it's inked up enough. That being said, I don't necessarily want this to be a super juicy black here, although I don't know, I probably put too much ink on there. Okay. Alright, now, let's see, I'm going to wipe off a little bit of the base here, although I think I might be doing some masking too, so I don't know if I really need to do that as far as wiping it off. Let's do something here. I think I added a lot of that black on here. Let me go for a little bit of variation in here with some brown. If there is some variation in here, I don't know. There might be, I'm not sure. And I'll wipe off some of the tops of the tree. You know, and some of these branches, maybe it'll look like it's some light is falling on it. Not really sure, but okay, let's see here. Where I used to take walks when I was a kid out by our house, it was kind of California chaparral, and a lot of oak trees. A lot of brown tones for sure. You can use, you know, if you want to stamp a different tree, you can use pine trees, whatever. Okay, there's one. I can go for another, maybe. I like the variation. It's very subtle, but I can see a little bit of that brown in the impression. I'll hold it up to the camera after I do this one. Okay, let's add another. Let's do it on the other side for a little bit of balance. Kind of deciding where I want to. You know, you just kind of move this around if you want to know, you know, where to put something. Just, you know, you can kind of move things around or stamp the image off to the side if you're using like an unmounted stamp and just kind of look at it, you know, and picture where you might want it to go. I mean, there's not going to be a right or wrong, but usually in terms of personal preference, you know, of yours, one area, you know, will generally stand out more than another. That's the same thing for, like, you know, birds. You just kind of move it around in the scene and see if, you know, one area, you know, just kind of, you know, it doesn't have to be a logical thing. It could be more intuitive, or it could be visual. Certain things will stand out more to you. Okay, here's what we're looking at right here. I don't know, it might just all look all black to you, but I put a little, there's black up in the branches and kind of brown on the tree trunk. It's subtle for sure. I mean, it doesn't really stand out a lot, but I like a little bit of variation a lot of times. Okay. Now this is the oak branch stamp. It's very, very large, and I'm trying to think if I want to add this in. Maybe that would look good, just using this little portion of it like that. But it would certainly reiterate kind of what's going on in the background. It would be something very bold to do. You know, having such a large shape like that. But what I say to that, might as well try it. Okay, now this one I'm just going to keep black as a nice silhouette. It's like us standing next to an oak tree branch or something, putting us as the viewer, kind of really, I don't know, integrated into the scene as far as like having something really close to you. It's like you're standing right in there. Okay, now I want my foreground things I really want to stand out nice and strong, so I keep that down there to get a lot of that ink transferred over to the paper. Okay, something like that. Alright, now let's go for a little bit more texture as well. This is very textural scene so far, but just to vary things a little bit, we do have kind of this grass texture in there. You can see kind of the it's kind of reversed out in terms of having these little blades of grass reversed, light on dark. But now this can kind of be dark on light. The same kind of area. Okay, something like so. I like that down there. I think it kind of anchored the scene out a little bit. I have to grab another stamp. I'm thinking there's a small oak tree. It's the same design but just smaller. I'll add that in there. But And I think we need some additional texture in terms of putting something on this road. It looks a little bit kind of bare to me. So what we can do is we can add on, this is really a dinky stamp. I should apply more of this tack and peel material to an even smaller block. I don't know. Do they make smaller blocks than this one right here? This is like it's like just over an inch. Okay, let's get some texture going in here. I don't want that brown. Let's go with kind of the dark brown. I'm gonna switch that around. So I can go for some lighter impressions in here as well. Kind of darker impressions in the darker area, lighter impressions back there, meaning kind of the second and third impressions of something. Okay. Alright, let's do this. Kind of in my head as I was stamping that, I was wondering if the larger tiny rocks, it's called Tiny Rocks Large. Is it called Tiny Rocks? I can't remember now. If I called it Tiny Rocks Large. Or if the smaller one is just Tiny Rocks Small, and this one's just Tiny Rocks. Anyway, same design, just larger forms of it, okay? Just to create a little bit of variation down here. So we have the larger versions, smaller versions. You don't have to use them both, but it was sitting on right here on my desk. But also, darker impressions of it, lighter impressions of it, okay? Kind of just, there's some lighter ones here and darker ones here, but vary things, you know what I mean? You might as well, you can extend the range of a stamp's capabilities by just changing the value of it within a given scene. You can make it look one way, you can stamp it twice, you can change the angle, especially with landscape stamping, to make it look different. I mean, for me, that's two oak trees and they're the same tree, but same image, but it doesn't necessarily have to look like, you know, so symmetrical, and you know, I used more of it on one side and less of it on another because I masked off the reeds down here stamped, and I changed the angle a little bit, you know, just to vary that somewhat. Alright, let's see, I need to get that other oak tree. Okay, this is the oak tree. And I'm going to stamp this in the background, so I think I'm just going to do it in the same brown that I stamped out my initial imagery in terms of the crooked path and sedge filler stamp, okay? Alright. Let's do a little bit of masking again. Let's put one about like right here. And I'm masking off the bottom because I want it to make it look like the tree is in the grass, okay? That's the same thing if I was stamping anything, any figure, an object in the grass. I don't want that. If I want the grass to look like it's kind of thick, then you have to kind of wipe off the bottom of it a little bit. Okay, trying to decide. Okay, let's put a tree in the back of that horizon there. So it's like on the other side of the hill, okay? Something like that. And why don't we go for one more? We'll put it right here, so. It's one of the beauties of scenic stamping, too, in terms of the repetition of imagery, you know. You saw the reeds used over and over. The oak tree was used twice, so you can really fill out a given area, you know, with the same stamp. Sedge filler was used, you know, in repetition. Okay, so there those three background oak trees are, so you kind of have three of the same types of things going on. You have a certain size, larger size, and yet a larger size. The oak branch is not a branch off of that oak tree stamp, but it's still the same type of thing, so you have this kind of continuity in terms of similar forms running throughout the scene, hopefully kind of lending itself to kind of a nice overall composition. And I was thinking about bringing in some extra black up here, but maybe not. I do have somewhere, I think I tested it out last time, but let me see if my Prussian blue is, yeah, my Prussian blue pad is fine. I was starting to have a little bit of breakdown of some of my pads, just in terms of the fabric finally. These pads are so old, but I am getting a little bit of a kind of a crumbling of some of the pads, but that's fine with me, you know. After 20 years of use, that's, I don't know if that's a fact, but it could be older in terms of these pads. These pads, this material has really has stood the test of time. Okay, this is Prussian blue. It's the number 29 Marby pad, and as you can see, it's it's a really dark blue. I love it. I don't know, I should use it more. I tend to forget about it sometime. But I'm just kind of bringing that up into the left and right corners there, just to kind of frame things off a little bit more. Okay. Alright, so that is our composite. I gotta remember to clean off that Prussian blue. Otherwise it really stains the foam pad. Not a big deal, because if you clean it off, even after it's stained, it's not going to apply to your paper, but anyway. Okay, those are that's my setting. When I first started this scene out, I was planning on using this little character here, the Hiker and Child stamp. I want to do a series of this Hiker and Child stamp being used in a scene. Maybe I'll do a triptych or something like that, using this stamp. But anyways, I'm going to stamp it right down here somewhere. And right here, it's like after a kind of a day out in the fields, hiking and exploring, heading home, thirsty and hungry, and that's the way I always remember that. Those fun times. Still hiking today. But, alright, that is the stamping coloring portion, composition. But we'll go add in some additional touches here. With what I usually do, some gel pens, paint pens, maybe not, some pigment ink, I'm not sure. But these trees here and reeds down below and that figure are really wet right now with that black ink stamped in there. It's not because it was black, but see, I added all these tones in there. That might be 7 layers of color underneath that oak tree. So when I stamp the oak tree on top, you know, in some of these darker areas in the branches, thicker areas of, you know, the design, there's probably some little beads of ink. I'm not sure if you can see it, but if I kind of tilt this, I don't think you can see it. Well, maybe here. See those little darker points right there? Those little things are wet, so I don't want to take the chance at this point in time of blurring them. I mean, I could do things like heat setting, but I tend to not like to do that too much. I like things to kind of air dry, and I think I'm going to do that before I go on there. Like I said, I especially don't want to get a blurred impression of those characters there too, so we'll let it set up, and I don't know, we'll take a look at this too. I'm thinking of bringing another pink into that area. That raspberry was just so light. It provides a good foundation though. Maybe I'll put on a little bit more of that raspberry, then bring in something like a brighter pink in here, just to kind of turn the day a little bit more towards you know, that time around sunset or before sunset or something like that, and give that sky a little bit more variation than just say blue, and you know, barely any pink in there. So give it a few hours. Okay, I'm back. I mentioned I'd be back in a few hours. That's not how long it takes for the ink to dry. I just got busy and I wouldn't be back for a few hours, but I am, and the scene has dried, and that pink up in, or that raspberry tone up in the sky is really kind of disappeared quite a bit in terms of that pale pink hue. So just reapplying, and that's something you can always do. Just go back and reapply it, providing you haven't done something like spraying the scene first. If you spray the scene, it kind of resists ink, so it's always best to get whatever you're going to get down on the paper first before spraying. You can add things like the gel pen dots or something like that after you spray it. And what I mean by that is, if you haven't seen a couple videos I did, I talk about spray sealants, you know, taking like an acrylic spray or a workable fixative, that type of thing, and spraying the scene, and it tends to kind of saturate the tones a little bit more, and kind of retains a lot of the I don't know, the vibrancy, or it recovers the vibrancy of a freshly inked scene or cardstock. Alright, now I've added that tropical raspberry over everything. It's really faint pink. I added some of it down here. I know it wouldn't look like pink because it is so pale, but alright, now this one is a brighter pink. Let's try this. This is a Rosemary, which is a Marvy, number 59. And it's a much brighter pink. Okay, that's the raspberry up there. I don't know. Maybe you can go with one or the other, or I don't know, both if you want to, or you can leave it, some of it kind of pale and some of it a little bit more vibrant. Adding some of it down in the landscape as well, just to kind of, I keep saying this word all the time, but it kind of gives a little bit of continuity between the two different regions, even though they're kind of a different hue. Alright, now what I'm doing here is I'm assessing. Okay, I'm looking at this area, say, underneath this tree, or the trees, and it looks a little bit unfinished to me. I guess could be the word. Meaning that I feel like that tree is kind of hovering on this area a little bit too much. So what I'm going to do is I just want to anchor that tree down a little bit more. So I'm going to take a paper towel like this. Let me get a freshly. So after I kind of use this area a little bit, sometimes it starts soaking through. Like right there, you can see it. And it's a good idea to get a freshly ripped paper towel again. Otherwise, what happens is if you start adding down ink, you pull it up and sometimes it's soaked through a little bit down there, and it gives you kind of this, this pattern of the, little pattern of the paper towel on there, which I really don't want. I don't know. So I get it sometimes, it happens. If I get kind of lazy and I don't re-rip the paper towel. I don't know why I don't. It takes like 1 second, but nevertheless, it happens sometimes. Okay, this is the dark brown. That's what it's looking like. So, oops, sorry. Here we go. Okay, right here, and that's what it looks like right there. That's not dark enough though, is it? I'm gonna have to go to black because the tree is black. So let's move into the black, okay? We'll use that same value to anchor that object down. So instead of that, it looks like that now, okay? Kind of sits into the scene a little bit more. Let's do the same thing on this side with that oak tree. Kind of doing a little bit of black and brown. Okay, a little bit more value right there, kind of on the outside area. Slightly more variation. It looks. I think I could use some right here too. That, see that when you look at it from a distance, it's kind of bare there. So let's try a little bit of texture right about like that. Just kind of break up that area a little bit more. When I start, what I'm essentially doing is I'm kind of deepening some of the shadows in the scene, and kind of in doing so, I think it's like kind of like you're turning back the clock a little bit more, or ahead actually, and making the scene a little bit darker and darker. But that variation, I don't know, it looks a little bit more complete to me. Okay. I'm assessing right now. When I stare at this like that, I'm kind of trying to figure out what I want to do, or what it needs, what I think it, you know, could use. Maybe a couple shades darker in the corners, just to kind of frame the scene off and kind of cap off the bottom a touch. Something like that. I don't know if I want to do anything up in the sky in terms of the two corners. Maybe a touch. I'll just add a little bit of black. It's a very thin streak of it, maybe a 1/4 inch, kind of tapering off to about a 1/2 inch down into the scene. Like so. Just to kind of frame it off slightly. Okay, now, oh, okay, we have our little figures down there. They're kind of floating in the scene. Let me add a little bit more of a kind of a hint of maybe a shadow. Now the design has a little bit of a shadow on it. Okay, and I'll just kind of do a little thin streak and just increase that value just a touch. See that little shadow now? It's being cast. Okay. Trying to decide what I want to do here. If anything more. Okay, one of the things that I can do, that I like to do, is I like to add a slight bit of texture in here. We already have the oak trees, but some of these areas are looking a little bit kind of incomplete, a little minimal, and I think it could use a little bit of texture kind of popping up in that grass. So I'm going to grab a stamp for that purpose. Alright, I found something that I want to use. I was actually looking for the smaller version of this bush stamp, but I'll just use the top of it, I think. This looks like that. Just some craggy little branches, just some kind of texture. And I'll do that in black ink. And we'll mask off in the same way that we did the oak trees. Okay. This is a way to kind of introduce something a little bit sharper into something kind of soft. Soft meaning the all of those tones that have been laid down in the I don't know what that is. It's not really meadow, but these fields here. And I'll hold this up closer so you can see it. Okay, but I was also contemplating this fence here. Putting it like right here or something. Kind of popping out in the foreground. Alright, I'm going to go for it here. There was this fence that we used to kind of hop over or under or whatever when we used to go out walking. So this is kind of based on reality. You know, to have this kind of in here like so. I could almost put more of it right here. Okay, just a couple of little posts down here, but I don't know, I think it works pretty well. I think it's pretty well integrated in with that area down here. And I stopped it right here, making it look like, you know, the road could come out this way. Okay, but back to that bush stamp. Just the tops of it. Is that little thing popping out in here like that? There's a little bit of it right here as well. 1, 2, 3. And then I added it over here. There's probably 1, 2, 3 impressions of it. This one barely has anything, but it just, I don't know, it just puts something hard and crisp amongst something that's kind of soft in here, meaning all that tone that's just been laid down. And having something crisp like that, it kind of puts something else in common with what you have down here. You have these crisp impressions of like the reeds and now this fence and this person. So it's saying that, you know, this layer of depth and the distance right here, you have something else kind of that's also kind of as clear as that, okay? So it's not just a matter of something, all these crisp impressions in the foreground, and it's just kind of blurred in the background. I mean, even these trees right here, these oak trees, are a little bit obscure, even though those, you know, they're pretty crisp impressions, but we have all that tone behind them, so they don't really stand out very well. So that's just where these little elements can come in handy. Let me try to bend this back so I don't get that glare. Okay, that's better. This is what they call a 10-point thickness piece of cardstock. Internationally, they don't go off of that rating system, the point system, as far as I know, so I don't know what it's called if you're watching this in another country, but out here they call it, you know, there's various thicknesses, like a cover stock. Paper might be like a 10-point or a 12-point, you know, depending on the thickness of like a book jacket or whatnot. Postcards are made, you know, probably from a 12-point. This is a 10-point. 12-point wouldn't bow quite so much, so if you ever have a chance of buying like a ream of paper, I would go thicker than what I have, and I would go with a 12, okay? But anyways, not to get sidetracked too much, on here now we have these figures, and that figure looks very kind of isolated in terms of the coloring on them, so they need something. I'm going to hit the pants on this adult figure with a little bit of blue, and it's kind of similar to the blue. That really faint blue right here and up in the sky. Okay. Maybe they're wearing blue jeans or something, I don't know. I mean, I could color it something else, but that blue can kind of create somewhat of a little bit of a relationship with the background. How about the shirt on that child? Maybe the red would be too extreme. Green? I don't know. Maybe I do want them to stand out a little bit. Or maybe not that much. I don't know. Not brown. That would be too integrated. I want it to stand out a little bit. How about blue again? Okay. So let's say that child is wearing like a striped blue shirt. How's that? Okay. But what color pants is the question. Do I go with the blue again? I think so. I don't think I want it to stand out too much, so let's do that. I'll put a little bit of maybe a tan tone on that backpack. Maybe the backpack was more kind of what you'd find in the early days of backpacks, not so much the super bright tones that you see today. So I'll do that. I'll do a brown, like it's, who knows, maybe it's like canvas or something. Okay, so anyways, they're a little bit more fleshed in, you might say, right? And somewhat more integrated with the surrounding area now. So little details like that, you know, don't forget about those, you know, add some color to them, especially if you have something like a, you know, an alcohol pen or just a lip plume or that type of thing. Kind of fine point tips. All right, we've done all that. Let's have some fun now with some additional touches in here. I'm looking around. Let's go for, now if you've seen a lot of my videos, if I'm doing a green grass, I tend to use a lot of like pinks and violets, you know, for like wildflowers, but that's not what we're going after this time. We're going after kind of more of a summer fall type of surrounding terrain to match kind of those brown tones. So I will not go with some of those brown tones. So anyways, this is a peach Sharpie pen, Sharpie paint pen. I bought it in a little pack like this. It's a pack of the pastel colors. I don't know. I've rarely used kind of darker tones, you know, for these highlights. It's usually going with a kind of a light in over dark type of application. This is not a real, well, it's light. I mean, if I put a few dots in here, you can see it like that. Okay, it almost stands out too much in that area, but I don't know, we'll test it and we'll see how this looks over certain areas. The lighting in here is not very bright, so I don't think I'm going to be using, you know, a lot of this, because it just, I don't know, it stands out too much. I generally want it to kind of fade in and fade out a little bit. I usually use some of this in the lighter areas, but it's not a super light scene except for on that road. Okay. So what we have is something like this. Okay, like right over here. I have it a little bit in the background. It's kind of hard to see on camera here, but I know I'm adding this into a lot of the areas that are somewhat the same value as this color. Okay, so it doesn't stand out so much. Okay, let's use some of it on the road. Just some of this texture like this, it can really make an area kind of come alive slightly. Just by kind of having that little extra texture in there. Okay, where's my white one? My white one might not be very good to use, but I'll use it in lighter areas on this road. It'll be very subtle. I'll bring it into some areas that have a little bit of tone into it so you can kind of see it. Maybe I'll just add it to the path, I'm not sure. By adding it to the path and kind of having it continue up there, it's kind of creating a little bit of a textural pathway. Let's see if we can see it at all. You can see little tiny dots down here a little bit. There's the peach ones right here. In the darker areas I won't add white. White will stand out too much. But I have some little textural dots in here and kind of going back in that area. I mean, it's very minimal. Okay. We used to go hiking for hours, like almost every weekend, somewhere. It was like in this type of area. It wasn't on too much of a path. There was a path to a certain extent, but a lot of times we would go off path, off trail. Okay, now, speaking of kind of subtle little details, this is the type of thing that I really love doing. Down here, okay, here we go. Down on that road, we have all those tiny rock impressions, right? It gave it that texture. Alright, now what I'm going to do is I have this pen. It's the plume, and it's a very light tone, but I can just kind of go in and add some additional tone at the base of some of these rocks, giving all those little things. I'm not going to do it on every one of them, but on some of these rocks a little bit of a shadow. Now this is so light it's not showing up at all, so I'm going to move to a slightly... Ooh, that's way too dark. I was going to say slightly darker one, so I'll try to see if I have one. This one's brownish gray. That one's... What is that? Okay, that's sepia. Okay, maybe that's... This is camel. Okay. Let's see if that shows up now. I always start in the darker areas because I don't want it to look too dark. Over some... Okay, this is it right here. See where like all these little rocks are? I'm just kind of adding this little shadow to it. It might show up over here because it's very light, right? But over here, it's not showing up so much because it's the same value. But, I don't know. Don't go overboard with it. Adding it to every single one, but we will add it to the shadow too for the figures underneath them. Okay, now where things get a little bit darker over here, maybe I can go with that darker one. Let's see. Okay. Well, it isn't very dark because the paper is darker, or yeah, this area is a little bit darker to begin with. But anyways, this is looking... I don't know. It looks slightly more three-dimensional to me, or just dimensional in general. Let me try it around some of these trees. Kind of livening up some of those shadows, I think. Okay. And because I really enjoy applying it to my scenes, I'm going to add a little bit of color box pigment ink, okay? Now, I say this in a lot of videos because whenever I use these things, you're hearing me saying this over and over and over and over again if you've watched it, a lot of these videos, but it's important to take your cotton swab and just apply it a small amount to your tip, okay? Well, I have a decent amount, but let me show you what I'm doing here. I'm kind of blotting this. We don't want that amount of ink on there, okay? So I'm blotting it off, okay? I'm doing it over those marker things so you can kind of see a little bit. See, as the more I tap that off, okay, the drier it becomes on here. So, see right here, I mean, it takes a while, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you can barely see any of it, right? Let me go back down here, this red area, okay? See, it takes me a while to add some of that tone, or that value of white. And that's kind of what you want. You want a real dry tip, okay? So it's like a dry brush application. And that way you have a lot of control. You're not putting these big blobs of ink all over your scene. Okay, let's back up a little bit here. Now I have to add this in some of these lighter areas because what this is doing essentially is saying that some of that light that's hitting these areas that are still the white of the page, or for the most part white, you're saying that there's that color light hitting those areas, alright? And what we're saying is there's a little bit of fog, maybe some moisture in the air. So that moisture is being illuminated by that same color of light. And sometimes less is better. Sometimes more is better. But this scene is fairly dark, so I won't want to add too much of it, I wouldn't think. This area is a little bit lighter in the background. Let's try a little bit of it back there, and we'll obscure some of that tree at the base maybe. Just so there's a little bit of variation in it. Here they are spattering here and there in the hill. Okay. So I don't know if you can see. Can you see that right there? What if I add a little bit right here? That area is kind of illuminated, right? Let's see how that looks. Okay. Now, I'm not hitting this very hard. It's a very light touch. And see with that repeated. You don't always have to be this delicate with it. It's just that this area right here is fairly dark, and I don't want that to be so light, okay? But just that little fuzziness, I guess you can say, is what I'm going after. The more I add, the kind of more it starts to glow, but you don't want to, you don't want the whole area glowing. It looks weird that way. Okay. So do that, a little bit of that, and then this is what it looks like kind of on the overall. You're just kind of changing textures a little bit and introducing a different texture here and there. And that can look kind of nice at times. It softens up some areas. Okay, now let's see if we can give our sky a little bit of the treatment. Maybe add some wisps up into the sky with it. Can you see that right there? So this is why you kind of retain some of that light, or one of the reasons is if you want to add something like this or the white gel pen, then, I mean, it's not just it's for lighting to retain some of that, but, if you want to do something like that, little touch, I need to do that more often. That looks kind of nice. So those little wispy kind of edges like that, kind of like a cloud, I guess. What a cloud might do. Yeah, I need to do this more often. I've done it in the past, but I don't know. It might be it might be years since I've done this. Kind of more of a free form, freehand kind of action. Now, see what I'm doing is my hand naturally goes like this, so I don't think it'd be. I mean, I guess I could go like that, but I find it easier just to go like that and do this kind of motion right here. Okay, this is fun. I think this scene suddenly, for me, became more about the sky than anything. Okay, now I just know that this paint, this pigment ink, can kind of dry lighter, so I'm going a little bit more extreme up here. And especially after I spray it, it's kind of like pastels or chalk. Sometimes it disappears a little bit, so I'm kind of going a little bit heavier handed than what might seem ideal, because I know that that can potentially kind of disappear a little bit. So okay, so let's see what this looks like now. Kind of a little bit more of an interesting sky, I think. Maybe have something coming out that way. Okay, here we go. Alright, maybe that's enough. Okay, so we have a sky up here, kind of with that pigment ink. Little freeform wisps. And that's what it looks like. Kind of more at arm's distance. Alright, trying to decide if I want to do anything else in here. I think the statement has been made. I don't know. I might decide to do something else between the time I do this and kind of the intro spot leading into this video, but I think for right now, here. Okay, that path. You know how I did that shadow along those rocks? Let me see something here. Okay, here we go. I need a little bit of a extra shadow along that path edge. Starting off very light, and I'll work darker, okay? But these little bluffs here need to be casting a little bit of a shadow. To keep consistent with everything else that's casting a shadow. Going with a little bit of a darker tone. Okay, here. And now I'll take my lighter tone and just kind of blend it in slightly. Okay, it's a little bit bright right now, but it'll kind of mellow out a little bit once this alcohol ink dries. Alright, so that is where we're at. A little bit more finished with that extra shadow. I don't know, there's a little details that I enjoyed doing. And the scene there'll be a little bit more of a continuity when I spray it too. Certain areas are a little bit more dull right now. Actually, it looks okay though, because this is bright. We have dull back here. But but when I spray it, it changes the character of it slightly from where it is now by having this a little bit more dull back there. But overall, this is, I don't know, this is pretty close to what I thought I'd be going after in terms of the tones around here. I wanted to have somewhat of a yellowish brown kind of look, but what we found was too much of just that one color scheme within that area. I think looked a little bit boring. So what we have going on in here is we have that little bit of green showing up and just a little bit of a hint here and there like that, okay, just for a little bit of variation. And in here it's the same kind of pink that's going on up here, okay, so we've introduced a little bit of that pink in here again, so that's like kind of moving more into your reddish tones within this brownish yellow scheme. It certainly relates to brown because you have that kind of red that's found in brown. You have green that's found in yellow, all right? And plus it's like this turning of the, you know, the green landscape over time, so that can kind of make a statement of, you know, time and passing of the seasons, or the transition rather. All right, and there's a little bit of that blue down in that path. That's the same color blue that's kind of happening in some areas up here. Kind of lighter blue that still is retained up here. There's a slight, I don't know, I hope you can see that on the video, but on your monitor, but there's a slight bluish tinge in here. And then I've reiterated that blue down here in their clothes, so something down here relates to kind of something going on up there. But you could, I don't know, we could have made those characters stand out even more by putting one in a red jacket too, or something like that. That's what they say landscape photographers used to do. Their secret weapon was putting someone in a red jacket kind of on the corner of the photograph, you know, overlooking like the, you know, whatever, the Grand Canyon or something like that. By putting a figure in there, it's kind of effective in terms of creating scale and adding a human element within a landscape photograph, you know, using people, and I don't know, it kind of puts you right into the scene. So anyway, fun stuff for me. Adding in these little wisps of here. I might strengthen it a little bit more with some, I don't know, stronger swipes in there, but overall that's something that I'm going to have to explore a little bit more. That was really fun. Kind of just from your color box swipes. Okay, you can see some up here, right? I don't know, it's really fun to do. And yeah, I don't know, maybe I'll add more. Undecided. But that being said, A Walk in the Fields, I think that'll be my title for this piece right here. And I hope you enjoyed the process of it as much as I did, and it takes me back as far as some memories go. I can't remember at this point in time, but I wanted to do a series of these little walks with those two characters right there in terms of that subject matter, just in different settings. Just as my little personal scrapbook as far as hiking memories go. Okay, thanks for watching, and thanks as always for tuning into the channel.